There is a new camera hitting the street photography scene, and I've never used anything quite like it. The technology inside this camera is pretty surprising. They call it the OM-3. Welcome to the future of street and urban portrait photography. Holding this camera in your hand feels like stepping back in time. It's simply beautiful and built like a small tank. But don't let this analog style camera fool you, because it's loaded with photographic tech. And I'm hitting the streets to test this puppy out. Right, this is a nice little composition here with these steps. Do like a shot overhead as well, kind of that bird's eye view look. It gives a nice diagonal line from the other corner of the frame. Focus point on the middle of the floor there. Here's someone there. That's the shot right there. A classic street photo produced by a camera made just for this genre of photography. With a respectable 20 megapixel resolution Micro Four Thirds sensor, you can actually produce up to an enormous 80 megapixel resolution image using some clever sensor shift technology, and the results are pretty surprising. Let's see this thing in action. So this little button up here called Computational Photography turns on high-res image processing, allowing us to go from 20 megapixels up to 50 megapixels handheld. You do have to keep nice and still while the sensor shift does its clever little trick. Zooming in on this chap reveals the sheer clarity and resolution of the high-res feature. Now the high-res feature is capped at 50 megapixels when shooting handheld. You can engage 80 megapixels when the camera is mounted on a tripod, which we'll look at shortly. Let's engage that handheld high-res again. I'm in autofocus face detect, doing an amazing job here on what is essentially a half-face profile. Notice on this high-res image the motion blur effect on the moving people in the background. We're on a zoom, 12 to 45 millimeter. Right. Now historically, Micro Four Thirds cameras have been very popular amongst wildlife and bird photographers because you get that ×2 crop factor on the lenses. So if you're shooting with a zoom lens of 45 millimeters, what you're actually getting is 90 millimeter full frame equivalent. Let's throw a bird shot in for good measure. Using that high-res feature again. Even at f4, the Micro Four Thirds camera offers good compression on this pro zoom lens. Yes, I feel like there might be a shot just along here, along this railing. So what I'm trying to do with this shot is split this image diagonally with this handrail and then get a single solitary person to come into the frame. ISO 1600 doing a very good job at noise control here. So the Millennium Bridge is notoriously busy with people walking past. So trying to grab a shot with one individual person, especially in the gap that I'm trying to go for, was really tricky, but I did manage to do it and I'm really chuffed with the outcome. Taken with the standard 20 megapixel resolution, one of my favorites of the morning. Now shooting in this computational high-res mode has some advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantage is that both photographer and subject matter need to remain still in order to achieve a clean, crisp image. Any movement from a person will render that image blurry. The flip side of this is that you can be really creative with motion blur effects without the need for physical ND filters or slow shutter speeds like you would with a regular mirrorless camera. But the main reason is that huge resolution, which blows other street photography cameras out of the water. So I'm just using this railing as a leading line from the corner of the frame and then focusing on St.Pauls Cathedral in the background. Right, so let's just engage that high resolution shot. And of course you do have to keep the camera very still. Let's just zoom in on this picture and have a look. Here's that cool motion blur effect in action. A moody day over Westminster. I'm going to do a quick demo on this 80 megapixel computational high res. You can see here in the high res menu, we have 14-bit color enabled, and we can choose tripod, and that will now engage 80 megapixels. Advisable to use a 2-second timer to keep the camera dead still. Exceptional image quality from this sensor shift technology. Right, what I think I'm going to do is take off computational at high res and just go with a standard resolution, f4, and then let's go with a shutter speed of 200, and we'll push the ISO up to 1600, and then we can get a nice crisp silhouette of anyone walking past. I use the arches here to frame the scene and the girl walking by. With the release of the OM-3 comes the reintroduction of this glorious creative dial on the front of the camera here, and it has a number of uses. Firstly, the color profiles, which offers a quick and easy way to color grade your images directly in camera. Using the color wheels, for instance, enhancing individual colors, desaturating others. How about having the power of curves at your fingertips, along with shading, sharpness, and contrast? It's almost like being able to edit your photographs before you even take them. So we're going to go with Vivid Color 3. This image is directly out of camera, no editing in post-production. Right, I'm going to engage this creative dial on the front here to color, and then in the menu we can choose from 4 different color profiles. I'm going to go with Color Vivid, which should give us some really rich, vibrant reds and oranges. So using these plants here as a way to peer through into the scene. Human Detect Autofocus doing a great job here, finding people walking into the frame. Once again, no editing involved here, just what came directly from the color mode chosen. Now, I have photographed this shop window before, it's one of the best in London, but what it does do is really show off the color profiles within this creative dial. This is completely unedited with rich, opulent color, as opposed to the raw image taken from the other direction. Now, there are a lot of street photographers out there who shoot exclusively in black and white. No problem for the OM-3. Shifting the dial to monochrome mode offers up 4 mono profiles, each of which have the ability to apply color filters, just like the good old days of analog black and white photography. As well as having the power of curves, you can also add realistic film grain with 3 levels of intensity. Monochrome mode offers some classic looking street images. Hey, check this street performer giving us Charlie Chaplin. This camera is well positioned for street portraiture, enriching the stories that we capture on our urban journeys. Another mighty feature of this camera is called Pro Capture, where you can fire the electronic shutter blackout free in fast burst mode, 20 frames per second, 50 or 120 frames per second. Raw images, that's quick. Now, anyone who remembers the middle of the 20th century who owned a camera probably held something very similar to this. Back then, they made cameras to last with amazing build quality. Olympus, if you recall, was one of those camera companies. Well, today, they're known as something else. They're known as OM Systems, and their flagship camera, the OM-1 Mark II, is the culmination of 3/4 of a century of innovation. And you take all of that technology and put it in a smaller, lighter, more elegant camera, you have the OM-3. That's what makes this camera so special. Features like live ND and live graduated ND filters. No more carrying around expensive glass filters in your bag. Simply choose your graduated filter by number of stops of light and reposition the gradient horizontally or on the angle to take your shot. What else? I mean, if I had a spare hour, I could maybe cover everything this camera has to offer. Focus stacking, that's a good one. It takes up to 15 sequential images, all with varying focus points, and fuses that image together to create an image where the subject matter is perfectly in focus and the background is out of focus. The autofocus is amazing. That uses AI subject detection on cars, trains, planes, people, birds, cats, dogs, you name it. Used alongside their prime lenses like this new Zuiko 25mm f1.8, image quality is up there with the very best in street photography lenses. I haven't even mentioned the video capabilities of this camera yet. 4K up to 60 frames per second in either the OM Cinema profiles or the OM Log 400 profiles. And this is the kind of quality that you could expect. I could go on, but hopefully the images in this video speak for themselves. It's a really sophisticated camera design built just for that urban street photographer, handheld with 7.5 stops of image stabilization. What more could you possibly want? Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please give us a thumbs up if you did, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more photography content. Sexy slow-mo.